Alrighty guys, we are back, and this time we are here to talk about some Warhammer 40k lore. This time, what the fuck is the Rogue Traders? Now you see, the Rogue Traders are a very unique topic just because they highlight the ultimatum of what someone can achieve. And what's interesting about them is that they are technically spin-offs of Rogue Traders, and there's differences that we're going to talk about between what is a Rogue Trader that makes them stand out versus these little spin-offs. So, first things first, let's just talk about a little bit of a lowdown of how this video is going to work out. We're going to talk about what is a Rogue Trader exactly, what are their legal capabilities. Then we're going to talk about how you could become a Rogue Trader. We're going to also talk about the history of why these Rogue Traders are so important. And then lastly, we'll talk about these spin-offs of Rogue Traders and why they have their differences. So, starting off with the beginning, what exactly are we talking about when we say a Rogue Trader? So a Rogue Trader is typically someone who owns their own liberties. They're allowed to conduct themselves outside of Imperial space even, and they're usually allowed, which is more interestingly, to own multiple planets and colonies and armies at their disposal. This being said, Rogue Traders do have to comply with some Imperial laws. Like, if an Inquisitor comes around and says, hey, I'm commandeering this ship, the Rogue Trader has to abide. But the Rogue Trader could issue a complaint to the High Lords of Terra, and his complaint could be met with serious scrutiny, to the point that they could outright revoke the Rogue Trader status, or they could revoke the Inquisitor status. These Rogue Traders hold a lot of local powers, typically is what we see, because after all, if Rogue Traders have their own armies and their own colonies, their own ships, that makes them usually a very powerful local base. These are not people who you will know their names across the stars. No. These are people who are going to probably be very local. That being said, being only renowned in a local sense is not a bad thing, because by local, we're still talking about, 100 planets, 500 planets, quite a big deal. But within all technicalities, what a Rogue Trader legally can do is take over planets. They can take over certain administrations. Let's say there's a planetary governor for the Imperium and he becomes a traitor. The Rogue Trader can come in and kill the traitor and then take over the entire planet and say this world is now private property of them. And technically, the Imperium of Man has to acknowledge that and say, yes, that is okay. Likewise, a Rogue Trader can go around and make deals and trade deals with aliens, and the Imperium will say that is okay to an extent. So in other words, it's okay that you have Tau weaponry, it's okay that you're using Eldar weapons, but it is not okay that you are helping them in super beneficial ways, whereas you're not helping the Imperium in equal or greater strides. There's one interesting excerpt that I like. This is mostly the Mechanicus, where the Mechanicus are about to void into the Ghoul Stars, and they need a Rogue Trader because he knows some of the region, and he has an ancient artifact that they need because it has navigational data that will get them in there. And then Mechanicus asks this Rogue Trader, where did he get such an amazing artifact? And he full on says it, I got it from the Eldar. And the Black Templars in the room were like, what? You didn't kill these Xenos, you talked to them? You slept in their craft world? You're a heretic, I'm gonna kill your ass. But even the Mechanicus said full on, like, nah, he's actually legally within his right to do that. And that's the thing, is that this is a Rogue Trader who was gifted Eldar equipment, he was gifted extreme Eldar hospitality, and in a lot of measures, that's considered okay. That's considered totally fine. Sure, he has ancient relics and stuff, but he's doing it for the benefit of the Imperium. Now, of course, the Black Templars sort of point out is that anything that the Eldar help you with is usually a bad thing. Of course, the Mechanicus and the Rogue Trader just kind of dismiss this as just zealotry. But this is some of the ways that rogue traders can get themselves in a lot of trouble, is that if a rogue trader steps too far, if a rogue trader does too much to damage their reputation, they could actually lose their power. Now you may say, what is the power? Well, it's called the Warrant of Trade. And the Warrant of Trade is usually signed by the High Lords of Terra or even the Emperor himself, if this dynasty is that old. But these Warrants of Trade give them those legal powers. It gives them all the powers that I just discussed. So now we're going to kind of talk about, well, how does one get this Warrant of Trade? How does one become a rogue trader? Well, the most common route is just that it finds out that you are a descendant of one of the dynasties, because the Warrant of Trade passes on to the heir. Now, the heir doesn't have to be direct. You don't have to be the actual son or daughter of the person who holds the warrant. No. You just have to be a family member. Doesn't matter who. This is much like the Elder Scrolls lore, if you ever get into it, where majority of the emperor's descendants are not their actual children, because their children tend to die, or they die before having children. So a lot of it is like offshoot cousins or distant relations who are assuming the mantle of emperor. This is the exact same with the rogue traders. They are so busy in their lives that they don't really have time to settle down or even make a kid. And sometimes the kids that they do make just aren't good enough. And this is where the rogue trader has to choose very carefully amongst all the people that they're related to, who would be the most beneficial to their dynasty. This can be met with a lot of interesting scrutiny. Like, for example, most heirs of the rogue trader usually specialize in something to stick out amongst the other heirs. Some of them become head priest, some of them become part of the Mechanicus, some of them become all sorts of things. Now, if someone was to become a space marine, they would technically be null and void, but if they were the only heir left, then what happens is the space marines chapter gets all the resources of the rogue trader. I'm just letting you guys know in case you guys were wondering how that works out. That's exactly the way it works out. Is essentially the space marine does not get anything because his identity is with his chapter, and the chapter would get stuff. That's nice for the chapter, but that's not nice for the rogue traders dynasty. So a lot of these rogue traders will tend to pick and choose their heirs very specifically and very cautiously. They may be in quite a bit of a pickle where the sector they're in has a huge Mechanicus influence, and all their descendants are psychers. Well, the Mechanicus, they don't mind a psyker or rogue trader, but it's not someone that they can really relate to. Meanwhile, though, you do have one heir who's a bit crazy, but he is, at least in some part, has aided the rogue traders and other Mechanicus in the past, because he used to serve as an admiral in the Navy, and a lot of his missions were dealing with the Mechanicus. Well, that heir would be perfect to usurp you once you die, because that heir already has good relations with the Mechanicus and knows how to deal with them. And if you're in a sector like that, then that's perfect. Likewise, let's talk about a sector where there might be a lot of aliens, a lot of Xenos, where you're going to need an heir who's either really good at fighting Xenos or an heir who's really good at understanding the Xenos. This is a coin flip. On one hand, if they're good at fighting Xenos, they could end up pissing off the Xenos so much that they wipe out their fleet and wipe out their dynasty. On the other hand, if they're too friendly with the Xenos, they could be declared traitors of the Imperium and lose their entire dynasty. You can see now why picking the heir is so difficult and so important. Now let's talk about how can you become a rogue trader if you're not blood related to any of the rogue traders. Simple. You shine bright like a diamond. That is it. What it is that you have to do such an amazing job and procure so many resources and procure so many victories for the Imperium that the Imperium bestows upon you the highest form of recognition, which is the ability to be an independent recognized entity. Now, funny enough, there is a lot of people who become rogue traders simply for political reasons. Because the thing is that when you're a rogue trader, you technically cannot hold any government titles. So what may happen, and this has actually happened quite a bit of times, is that some high lords are competing with their rivals, and their rivals are way too successful. So the high lords of Terra will get together with each other, and they'll give the guy a rogue trader warrant of trade. And they say, wow, dude, you're such an amazing guy. Here you go. What they just did is they just stripped you of all your political power. So you could have been like the best senator, the best representative, the best spokesman ever. And here you are climbing the legal ladder on your way to become a High Lord of Terra. And all the High Lords of Terra just cut your career permanently because they said, here you go. You're a rogue trader now. Congratulations. Yeah, no. Basically what they said was, get the fuck out of here. We're going to just make it where you can never have a career ever again. And the funny thing is that when a warrant of trade is issued, the warrant of trade can sometimes have legal binding phrases in it. Like, some warrants of trade strictly demand that you go to X planet and take it over. Some warrants of trade demand that you go and patrol this sector. Some of them demand that you specifically map out a certain area. So this one's not even combat related, just mapping out an area. Some require you to deliver supplies to an area. And this warrant of trade lasts forever. So therefore, some rogue traders are in a sector or in a certain spot of space, and you're wondering why are they there when it could be more profitable for them to do their business elsewhere. Well, that's the reason why. The warrant of trade is a legal document saying they have to stay there. They cannot go anywhere where they please. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because what about our friend? The one who's climbing the political ladder. He was an amazing guy and he just got handed the warrant. Well, a lot of times those guys usually get a warrant of trade with no actual boundaries. And those are very rare. Like, those are extremely rare. But a lot of times if the warrant of trade is given out for political reasons to get rid of a rival, usually they don't have any sort of restrictions. So therefore, the guy can literally just go wherever the hell he wants in the galaxy and they really don't care. It just goes to more evidence to the idea that they just want to get rid of you and just assassinate your career. Now, what's really interesting is that while the rogue traders do have these duties, let's go back to what those statements are, those issues. The rogue traders can do a lot of cool things with that. Like, let's say I am now a rogue trader and it is my solemn duty to guard and maintain this one sector of space. Well, I may be able to skew that and say, in order to protect this sector of space, I need to do dealings with people outside of that sector. So I am technically allowed to do this, but eventually I have to come back, and the High Lords of Terra will be watching that very closely. And when a rogue trader is more or less deployed, this is going to lead to what I said at the beginning of the video. Why are rogue traders historically so important? Why are they needed in the Imperium? Well, the Imperium is so vast that even the Emperor himself foresaw the need of individuals who had freedom to go around and complete things that eventually the administration itself would not be able to uphold. One such instance could be that there is a sector of space where, yes, it's functioning exactly as it should. There's no issues. Every planet is well supplied. Great. But now all of a sudden here comes an orc wog, and the orc wog is very minor in the grand scheme of things, but it's still big enough, especially since it just destroyed 2 agriculture worlds, or agri worlds for short. And now the entire sector is starving. Well, the Imperium of Man would just look at that and go, they'll survive, they'll just have like 300 years of starvation, a few forces lost, but they're still going to be shipping out weapons and ammunition. They'll still deal with the WOG eventually, so I don't see an issue. Well, a rogue trader can alleviate that by a lot, because now the rogue trader is using his resources that are technically off the books and saying, hey, listen, I have a bunch of Eldar food. I have a bunch of home food from my own personal dynasty. And then I even have my own army. So let me go over into the sector, help you guys out, and in return, you guys make my dynasty more notorious, more renowned, and you spread my name throughout the Imperium. And by knowing what my great deeds are, I'm now allowed even more. Like maybe those 2 worlds you just lost to the Orc WOG, now they're under my control. And now I strictly alone provide food for the entire sector. That's more power for me, because then that means I can tell these worlds, hey, since I saved you guys and I'm literally providing you the food on your plate, you are now going to give me 200 Leman Russ tanks. And they have to listen to you now. This is why a rogue trader is so important. This is why rogue trader is so powerful. So besides that, let's talk about the last part of this video. There are a few things that step outside the bounds of a rogue trader, but they look and they walk like a rogue trader. Basically skinwalkers. So what are those things? So the first thing that looks and walks like a rogue trader is a letter of marque. A letter of marque is more or less a document that gives all the things that a rogue trader can possess, but it's only in a specific circumstance. So in other words, let's say I'm an Imperial commander. I do a really good job. I took over like 6 worlds from a Chaos warband. And now I'm given a letter of marque. And the letter of marque specifically says I am now given my own weapons, my own ships, my own men, and whatever planets I take, I can own. But I have to invade and take over 6 more worlds. Now, you may say, well, that's very specific and that's very weird. You are absolutely right, because a letter of marque is very short-lived. It's very specific. It is only tied to a very certain circumstance, and that is it. Usually letters of marque are usually made for wartime stuff, and they're usually still called rogue traders. So you can still be called a rogue trader, but it's just that your goal in life is to complete this one objective. Now, what happens when you complete the objective? Let's say it was to take over or to wipe out a specific enemy. That's great. Now what happens is that you still maintain that letter of marque, and you're still allowed to keep what you earned, and you're allowed to profit off of it. But once you die, that is it. The letter of marque goes away. All the shit that you owned now goes back to the Imperium, or it goes to a rogue trader who actually is nearby and is able to lay claim to your stuff. And they can lay claim to it saying a number of things like, oh, this is now leaderless, and to prevent rebellion, I took over it for a short period of time, so it's now a part of my dynasty. Anything like that. Now, letter of marque can be reinstated by the heir of the person who had it, but they have to go back to Terra and get it approved. That means that this is a warrant that needs constant renewal. This is a warrant that you have to waste a lot of time in reviewing, and you might not even get the deeds. And then when they renew the letter of marque, you might not even get your possessions back. So let's say I took over 12 worlds for the Imperium of Man. Those worlds that were originally supposed to be mine because my father ran them, well, because he's dead and the Imperium renewed the letter of marque, they say, okay, you need to conquer 24 worlds now, but you are going to do so with these resources that we're giving you. All the resources your father had are now being used by us, the Imperium, for other things. This is why the letter of marque is really not that amazing. It's cool for you, but it's not cool for your descendants. Your descendants are going to have an awful time trying to get this all figured out. Now, There is one more thing that is similar to a rogue trader in all aspects, and everyone should know it, and everyone's going to be very interested when I say it. The Inquisition. When an Inquisitor is created, when an Inquisitor assumes the mantle, they are allowed to do just about everything that the rogue trader is allowed to do. They're allowed to take over certain worlds. They're allowed to have their own military. They're allowed to establish their own relations and fame. But the big thing with the Inquisitor is that they pass on the baton, so to say. They pass on their inquisitorial title to whoever their apprentice is. It's not strictly bound by blood. It's not an heir thing. And then, not even that, they may not even pass it on, because the moment that they die, the Imperium of Man will just simply take all their resources or divide it out to local factions. Like they may say, listen, this Inquisitor was part of the Ordo Malleus, and because he was part of the Ordo Malleus, we're going to give all of his stuff to the Grey Knights, or we're going to give all of his stuff to some of the Space Marine chapters nearby, or we're going to give all of his stuff to the Navigators. This is the Imperium's decision. This is not for anyone else to speak. The only time that the Inquisitor has a say is if he designates that he is passing on the mantle, as I said earlier, to his apprentice. Then his apprentice could technically take whatever his master's resources were. Sometimes, though, they still don't get that chance. And that's not a big deal for an Inquisitor. It's really not, because their goal is to purge the Xenos, kill the heretics, and, strike righteousness. So if they lose all their master's resources, that's okay. They're okay with that. Whereas a letter of marque and a rogue trader, they would not be very happy with that. So besides that, this has been Freezer 700. I am out. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, see you guys next time. Comment down below what you guys thought. Maybe you guys view it differently. Maybe you guys enjoy the legal aspects of the Imperium. Maybe you guys just enjoy some of the roleplay ideas where I just fish out ideas that are very interesting to explore, like how the Imperium of Man can be a little unforgiving at times, and how the Imperium of Man kind of screws over competent people with their legal loopholes. I think it's really fun, though. It's a really interesting universe. So comment down below. See you guys next time.